All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the March 21st work session of the Croton Harmon Board of Education to order. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agenda.
So moved. Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain? Motion carries. All right. Well, we will jump right into our work session this evening, and I will turn it over first to Superintendent Walker to get us going. We'll be hearing our building level and pupil personnel services budgets this evening.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the Tigers who are here in person and those watching at home. I'll be brief because we've got some great content for the board and community to hear from our building leaders and from Rachel, the Assistant Superintendent for PBS. But I just want to say that as budget presentations go, this is always one of my favorite ones. And hopefully one of the favorites for the community, because we know that as much as budgets are a function of dollars and cents, they're about vision and they're about values and how we go about hopefully engaging in a conversation with the community about the value of funding that vision and those values. And what you'll hear tonight is a continuation of some, in my opinion, inspiring work that's been happening in the system for years. And this is about a trajectory of growth toward that concept of what school can be. And so what you're going to hear from the leaders in the system tonight are ideas about what we think best helps to envision that in the 24-25 school year. But perhaps equally as importantly, what we see happening in the system beyond that. So longer term vision conversations around what we want the trajectory of growth for the system to be. Reflected in the next step through the budget for 24-25. And so it's my pleasure to turn it over to our phenomenal building leadership team and to Rachel to share these ideas with you. Starting with CET.
Denise, are you speaking on these ones? Or
Oh, I was not going to.
Okay. I just heard additional. No,
Here is a backup.
so I was really focused on the slides that we did, so.
I'm happy to speak
Okay.
about it, sure. So this is the CET current budget for the 24-25 school year. We have curriculum development and supervision. You'll see a small change in that, and that is reflective of some salary reductions, some travel reductions in that code. And you'll also notice that curriculum development and supervision for CET is considerably larger than the other buildings. And that is because we have our house leaders incorporated into that, because they are not per se curriculum and co-curricular as they are in other budgets. We have supervision here that encompasses the principals and their support staff. Then we have teaching, as Carrie and Craig will share with you, that is up due to salary increases, staffing increases due to an additional section. And then we have teaching special schools that summer that has remained stable. School library and AV, predominantly salaries in that component. And then we have guidance services, and I have to apologize. That is now being labeled as counseling services. The state and their budget coding system is never going to catch up to that. So everything as far as our reporting is probably going to be maintained as a guidance services, but we're going to try to reflect that moving forward in our budget documents. Health services, those are for nursing services, and then we have psychological services. You'll see a slight decrease in that because we are apportioning a portion of that salary to a federal grant. So that is why that is slightly lower. And then we have our co-curricular activities. The next slide is just a reflection of the percentages of the entire budget, which, as you can see, 82% is teaching and salaries, followed by supervision, school library, psychological and health services.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I'd like to start the presentation for CET. And just talking a little bit about our journey, where CET has been with Reimagining Learning and where we plan on going. So as you can see from our slide, we've talked about these over the last 2 years between the house system, ITAD, our IMSE training, and our latest with our instructional coaches. So as we travel along the way, some of the things we'd like to highlight is the innovative thinking, changes to our master schedule and how we've accommodated new programs and ideas, teacher input to revise and to improve these programs and models, opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other. I think that's one of the things we're most proud of. Our professional development initiated by both our faculty and administration. We really also pride ourselves on the ability to give our students the experience, whether it's through the house program or co-teaching model, with the ability to learn across different age levels. We build connections with our staff, our students, and our community members. We also look at best practices of instruction. And we've really, over the course of this year and looking into the next 2, 3, 4 years, are looking at ways of maximizing our instructional coaches. That brings us to our next slide with how CET is going to continue on this path to reimagine learning.
So some of the things that you'll notice are that this budget supports meeting the needs of our increasing enrollment. 2 years ago, we added a section of kindergarten. Last year, we added a section of first grade. And so that cohort is continuing to move through CET. So at least for the 24-25 school year, we're budgeting for an additional section of second grade. We continue to support our instructional coaches through professional development opportunities and building the capacity in our instructional coaches to continue to be a valuable resource to the rest of our faculty and staff. Through ITAD, we're looking for further collaborations between special area and general education teachers to enhance our student experiences. And sometimes that has a budgetary impact because they'll have a wonderful idea of something new and innovative to do. So when they come and ask for materials or supplies or resources to make those dreams and passions come true, we like to be able to have the monetary support for them to be able to do that. We, in the past, provided our Hegarty training and implementation in first grade as a tier 1 intervention. Next year, we will be looking to provide some additional training so that second grade can use it as a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, meaning that the special education teacher on second grade would receive some training so that for those students who've kind of aged out of tier 1 need for Hegarty. Hegarty is a phonemic awareness program that is very much in line with the science of reading. So she would be able to service children at her grade level through some professional development. And then we've seen an increased need to be able to support our strings program at CET. As you know, we offer strings 1st through 4th grade. And we've had a slight decline in enrollment because kids can't have an instrument at school and at home and transport it back and forth. So we'd like to invest in some additional buying of instruments or rentals so that more children can participate in the program without having to transport, especially larger instruments. If you look at the larger string instruments and you're looking at a 1st grader who's interested in playing that, it makes it a little difficult. So in order to support that arts program at CET, we are asking for an increase to be able to have more students participate in that experience. Next slide. So some of the other things that we're looking at and we've kind of talked about and done a little bit of work with this year is looking at multi-age and multi-grade AIS groupings with our current configuration of AIS. So for example, if we have a 2nd grade student who's still struggling and doesn't even necessarily match the ability level of other kids in that grade level, being more flexible about allowing that child to be in a different group without any stigma of being with a different group. And that leads us into one of the budgetary implications that this budget would help support is a change in our current AIS program. And if whoever has the thing can click on that link that's in there that says AIS program changes. Oh, sorry. I shared it with so many people that I didn't realize it still had a thing. My apologies. Give me half a second. And of course, my computer's not updating, so I can't.
So as Kerry begins to pull that up, I'll just add lib.
Oh,
Presently, right now, we have a 1.0 AIS teacher, mainly math intervention. We also have a 0.8 reading interventionist and 2.4 AIS reading interventionist. So for a total of 2.6 total. So what we're
Craig,
looking,
can you just repeat that?
sure,
I'm hoping
absolutely.
it pops up.
It's
It'll
popping
be
up?
here. I hope so.
All right.
So it's 0.8.
Right,
A full 1.0.
Here we go.
Okay.
thank you, sorry about that.
Well,
My
no.
apologies.
Yeah, okay.
So our current model, we have a 1.0 who just does math. We have a 0.8 who does ELA. Both of those instructors are in the CET 5 days a week, but the 0.8 is not there the full day. Then we have 2.4s that are only at CET on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they are not there for the full day. So in our proposed model, we would go from 4 instructors to 3, but it's an increase of the 0.2 because we would go to 2 full-time and 1.8. The 2, and everybody would be there 5 days a week, and the 2 1.0s would be there for the full day. If you go to the next slide in here, these are some of the pitfalls of our current model, with them only available 3 days a week. That's all they're available. If someone has a question for an AIS teacher on a Monday or a Friday, they have to wait till Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Their schedules only allow for 1 pullout per grade level during the WIN period. That it's only 3 times a week. And there's a couple of supplemental pullouts, but not enough to really meet the needs of all of our students. In our current model, we have no access to a literacy specialist as a resource or an instructional coach. And in that model that we shared, one of those 1.0s would be part-time intervention teacher and part-time literacy coach. So right now, our math AIS classes are not always at capacity because our kids, quite frankly, do really well in math. And so our current math AIS teacher often doesn't have full classes, and that's kind of not using our resources the best. And then students currently who qualify for both ELA and math have to choose one or the other. They can't attend both to get intervention because it's offered at the exact same time. And when we talk about going from a tiered approach and we go from tier 2 to tier 3, the difference between tier 2 and tier 3 is duration and frequency of the service. We currently cannot increase our frequency of service because they're only there 3 days a week. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see what we hope to gain by this new proposed model. Access to a literacy certified reading specialist for small group instruction and coaching. You see a 70-30 split there. That's not set in stone. That'll depend on our students' needs and our faculty needs. So that's not set in stone, but just to give you an idea. We're looking for opportunities for ELA and math interventionists to be delivered in an interdisciplinary model. When our AIS providers talk now, they talk a lot about that some students are not successful in math because it's so literacy based, and that if they don't have the grasp of the vocabulary and an understanding of what the reading involved in math is, there's a discrepancy in what they can learn. So this way, where appropriate, we could do it interdisciplinary. Increased availability of the AIS to allow for these multi-grade and multi-age services. Again, a distinct differentiation between tier 2 AIS and tier 3. So a child at tier 3 can go 3 days a week. A child who needs to be bumped up to tier 3 can now go 5 days a week because the providers would be in the building. We can schedule more than 1 WIN period or supplementary period for grade level. And those who require ELA and math can receive both. They no longer would have to choose. And we're also looking for consistency and fidelity in the delivery of those intervention programs. So those are all the things that we're hoping to gain by proposing a budget that supports that shift of the 0.2 increase in our intervention programs.
Yeah, and this conversation really came alive earlier in the year as we started to talk about the multi-sensory approach to reading. We were meeting with our primary teachers. One of their largest concerns and on their wish list was if we could now have our AIS instructors be available 5 days a week. So for those really needy students, you have the consistency of a Monday through Friday approach, not necessarily a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, get a little traction, have 4 days off before the next, and I'm being transparent.
Yeah,
You
no,
know, and not have a
100%
4 day, say, hiatus from that instruction to continue at 5 days. Another thing we really support with this is the ability now for our AIS teachers to do more of a push-in model into the classrooms, to be working with those students directly in the room, which we all know how beneficial that is.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about the literacy coach on that page. And again, we're really looking for another collaborator, another resource, someone who truly has experience coaching with a literacy model. So this budget would support that.
So that would be in addition,
No, it's one of the 1.0s.
it's one of the 1.0s,
Right.
so what I discussed a few minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's not an additional person to be the coach. It's one of the 1.0s with a role.
Pleasure.
We are looking at a partnership with Dr. Blair at CET, where we're trying to envision what a multi-year vision for CET will be. So we envision really bringing people together who have a sincere interest in making changes, trying something new, taking a risk, being bold. And so we're excited to partner with Dr. Blair for that. When we talk about differentiated win periods, we're looking at opportunities for our teachers across a grade level to say, you know, during the win period, I'll take all the students who have this interest or at this reading level on the grade level. You take the students who have this interest or this desire or this learning style, and really differentiate win periods for those students who remain in the classroom and are not pulled out for a service. We're looking at redoing our report cards and having a report card that reflects more student ownership and voice, and a report card that really prioritizes what we value, which is social and emotional learning as well as the academics. And right now that kind of falls lower on what you see when you look at our report card. So really refocusing what our report card should be reporting to parents.
Can I add to that?
Yep.
We'd also like for our report cards to be evident of a document that students understand as much as the adults understand. So we want it to be a discussion where a student can participate in their report card, have a conversation with their teacher, and the student be able to visually see where they are on that report card, what their strengths are, where their weaknesses may be, and develop a plan with their teacher moving forward to meet those needs.
Is that something you're just developing from scratch, or are there good models out there that?
You want to know the truth?
Yes.
Well, actually,
Are you sure he can handle it?
yeah, can he handle the truth?
I can't.
Okay. When,
Before you talk about that model, to ask just for a standards-based report card with anchor or power standards that reflect what we emphasize, we have had trouble finding samples of a traditional standards-based report card that reflects what we're trying to do.
true,
When
and
we
we
were in
reached out to
Washington
our,
DC, we found another avenue to explore, which.
right, so we were at the Learning 2025, and we had gone and witnessed all this fabulous learning and all these great ideas. We both walked away from the Mineola school system, had given a presentation on a badging system. And we both walked away from it and said, you know what, we have to revisit that. And you know how things get, you get kind of a whole bunch of things going on. Whereas we're talking about doing the re-envisioning of the report card, we kind of came back to this badging system where it's an idea where a student will, beginning the year, they'll sit down with their teacher and they'll earn badges. I can make a connection to say like the Scout badge, where they'll earn a badge and they actually can see what the criteria is for that badge, all in, say, student language. That badging book goes back and forth from home to school, so the parents are aware of it. And each time they earn a badge, they understand why they earned that badge, whatever that criteria might be, and then what they need to kind of progress along that in kind of a linear fashion, in order to kind of meet their next goal.
And the badges are standards, are aligned with the standards for the state. So again, you're not just picking random things, you're totally aligned with the state, but it just does, it presents for growth and progress and planning and goals in a way that a child can relate to. This is something that is research supporting. We have books and articles and examples of that type of system. So right now, we're still meeting with our faculty to decide which is the best route for us to go and what most signifies what we're trying to accomplish with a report card. We're also working with Judy Wilson, who's been a constant, she consults with the district, so we've been working with her on that as well. We continue to have our faculty and students pursue their passions. We've seen a lot of increase in that happening through buddy classes. So for example, if a fourth grade class is buddies with a second grade class, they get together for multi-age, multi-grade experiences. Very often you're able to take a through line in the curriculum that maybe shows up in second grade as an introductory, but is more mastered in fourth grade so that it can come together and the fourth grader becomes kind of a teacher and a mentor for the younger kids. So we're seeing that happen more. And then our summer enrichment programs that we established after COVID when we returned are still alive and well and evolving based on student needs, teacher passions, and we're happy to still be able to support providing those experiences for the children over the summer. Next slide. Along the lines of the cultural well-being in the vision map, we are looking to have an additional curriculum coordinator at CET. We would like to add a social emotional curriculum coordinator because we always talk about the emphasis on social emotional learning, especially with our younger children. And this would support curriculum implementation and assuring that students transfer skills to real life experiences. So when children get taught, like you see the little spot curriculum, we're piloting that curriculum right now. And the students are very engaged in the lessons. They're very interactive and they can answer all the questions, but then they go out on the playground and there's not necessarily the follow through of what they just learned at a lesson in these real life situations. So as a social emotional curriculum coordinator, we'd have somebody who could be on the ground out there with children, looking to see what might be transferring, what isn't, what do we need to revisit in the classrooms. So we are asking for that new position at CET, and we think it will benefit students directly and faculty and staff as well. We're also very excited about.
Hold on.
Sorry,
Let's
yeah.
ask, you're talking about a curriculum coordinator has a stipended
Correct,
person who,
correct.
in addition to his or her teaching and perhaps some, giving some, yes.
Yes, so
Yeah, very similar to what we do
Accommodation.
right now with like a K-4 math curriculum coordinator or social studies or science.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that, as you described it, is much more student connected and observational as well as.
yes, it's both.
Right, so that's really gonna take time for the coordinator to be where kids are, to see how kids are doing, which you don't have with your math or.
Correct, but what's happening simultaneously that kind of makes that work is, so this little spot curriculum that is a social emotional curriculum, we've been piloting in various classrooms on a variety of grade levels. That will be fully implemented next year across all grade levels, and that's a tier 1 curriculum. So currently Miss Woolley goes in for a lot of the teaching of those classes, but if it's implemented at tier 1, that means the teachers will be teaching that. So it actually will free up some time for a curriculum coordinator of social emotional learning to be hands-on in the field, literally and figuratively, with our students. And one other idea, just to support the social emotional growth and cultural well-being, you know very well that we have our 8 houses. What happens that we've noticed and want to kind of remedy is kids get very caught up in the house they're in. So if we're talking about cooperation, they can tell you everything about cooperation, but they may not be able to identify what integrity is. And so what we'd like to do, and you'll see the little picture, we've identified children's books that go with each character trait, and that we will rotate those. So 1 month, the whole school will read about respect. And then the next month, the whole school will read about empathy. So they're not just focused on the character trait of the house they're in, but they're learning about all those other valuable traits and how that should look and what we expect to see from our students learning about all those character traits.
All right, now we get into some of the fun stuff, and that's reimagining some of our spaces. So I'm gonna take you for those of you who've ever been to CT, down in our fourth grade wing, if you've been around long enough, we have our projects room, which say maybe 32 years ago was an art room. Very large space down in the fourth grade wing. It's actually part of the fourth grade wing, but it's so tall, it actually goes into the third grade wing. Beautiful space, it's huge, it can hold 2 classes. It has a sink, it has kind of a few different alcoves, wonderful space for collaborative learning. So one of the things we'd like to do is reimagine that space and make it into like a true collaborative space where we could get the flexible furniture, we could get the flexible workspaces, and now invite our co-teaching classes to come down there, to have some teacher modeling and watching others kind of hone their craft, and having classes. We could use it for in-house area, we could use it for our staff development. We envision it being where there's kind of creative workings of the space, where not only for students to come together, but after school for our staff, when they meet, when they have their collaborative time, to just come into a different space that is really well suited for working together for collaboration and collaborative work.
Credit where credit is due. We were inspired by room 213 at the high school and that
Absolutely.
space, and how when every time you're in there, you just feel that the environment creates a culture for that collaboration, that learning, and that excitement. So
Yeah.
we were inspired by that.
And I'll be honest, a lot of that is also staff driven, like when we have our staff members on a superintendent's conference day, or maybe they're part of the new teacher academy and they're coming over to the high school and they leave room 230, they're just inspired. It's just that visual space, you know, and if it's exciting for the staff, you know what? It's gonna be exciting for the students. So we've all talked about this. Most of us in the room at some point have been teachers. When you have that excitement and students are excited, great things happen. Along those same lines, if you've been in CET, and for those of you who are gonna visit tomorrow, you may have noticed that our, right outside of our multi-purpose room, outside of Mrs. Horton's music room, we have that lobby area where we do morning drop-off and morning pickup, and where our CAA students gather. We've really opened up that area. We've moved our lost and found. We've moved some of our shelving and say, custodial materials to really open up that space. And Mrs. Horton and a few other teachers have been going into that space and once again, reimagining that space to make it more student-centered, to make that more student-friendly. So what we would like to do in connection with our social emotional learning, to link it, we really want a place that is in a different location of the school that we can not only use as a learning space where students can go as an alternate learning area, but also a place where during lunchtime, perhaps during recess or an assembly, if a student needs a different environment, maybe they need to get out of say a noisy assembly, or maybe there's something going on in the lunchroom and we want to bring a student out and maybe have a conversation with a teacher, maybe have a conversation with to have that flexible space where they can go and they can be comfortable and they can use an alternate space. So looking at these 2 different spaces we've had in our school forever, and just once again, making those spaces a little bit more exciting, making them look different, making them feel different, and really having a purpose with reimagining what that furniture might look like, or what those workspaces, learning spaces, or like a social emotional break space, you know, could look like moving into the future.
So is this somewhat similar to what middle school has done?
Well, we don't want to say the other schools inspire everything.
No.
But with that said, we get the same feel when we leave PVC. When you're in the main hall with all that, you know, and the modular furniture where you know what? I could shape my furniture, I can meet with 3 or 4 students, I can meet with an entire class. Or better yet, you know what? A class is coming from music, they have 10 minutes before they have to go to lunch. Why not gather all the students there, do a read aloud or do an activity? So just having that ability to take a space and use it, whether it's going to be for a meeting place, whether it's going to be a learning space, whether it's just going to be a place to have a discussion, just to kind of maximum, CT like the other schools are growing, to maximize our space and to make it as effective as a space for our students and staff.
It's really not a construction, it's really.
No, not a
Yeah,
construction.
yeah. And I'm always touched by when I'm walking to the PVC office, just seeing the different little groups of kids. They could be talking, they could be working, one could be sitting quietly reading a book, but it's a place for them to feel comfortable and to feel established and safe, but yet not like this under a teacher's, it doesn't have to be that structured. And I always love walking past there and just seeing the groups of kids having conversations. So yes, we do envision it being a similar space to them.
Can't wait to come take a nap.
Just looking forward, like we talked about, beyond this year, just some ideas to explore. I want to be clear that none of these are things that are set in stone. These are when you ask us what school can be. These are the questions that pop into our head of things to explore. So one of them, and this would be a collaboration with Dr. Blair and with Rachel DePaul, where as our enrollment is increasing, our ICT special education teachers are losing their own classroom space. So we've been fortunate at CET for years to be able to say, in an ICT setting, the gen ed teacher has a classroom and the special ed teacher has a full classroom. That's not sustainable with our increased enrollment. So what I would like to do then is work with both Jared and Rachel on, if we're putting these two teachers in a classroom and there is no additional space for them, how do we make those classrooms conducive to the ICT models of parallel teaching, of team teaching, and how do we make it so that they can get around the classroom easily, or bring groups together and they can sit together in a comfortable way. So we do envision expanding our flexible learning spaces into our ICT classrooms specifically moving forward.
Then our next one with the multi-age, multi-grade CET house experience. We've been very fortunate to have quite a lot of success with our house system and what it has brought to our students and what it has brought to our staff. But as we move on over the next couple of years, we're asking, what if? What can we do next? What can we do to push the envelope for the house system and to give more of the multi-age experiences? Look at how could that be on a more academic level, or looking, polling our students, talking to our students. What ideas do they have? Our staff is always coming, being extremely reflective, saying, can we try this? Can we try that? Doing more outreach to the community and really looking on how we can move our house system to the next level, talking about doing activities with not just one house or one buddy house, but maybe 3 or 4 different houses, and really look at broadening that experience across all different age levels from kindergarten through 4th grade at CET.
We also look at, where is our ITAD program going? So that was designed when there were 5 sections of each grade level, and the special area teachers had a lot more time in their schedule to be able to do ITAD. Well, again, as we go to 6 sections in 3 of our grade levels next year, the way we had it set up no longer works. But we have heard such passion from our special area teachers and our gen ed teachers that we have to figure out a way to still merge and allow collaborations between our special area teachers and gen ed. So what does that look like? Does it look like possibly a block prep for the teachers so that during the day, there's time for the special area teachers to not be a prep for the gen ed teachers, but spend time in the classrooms? So these are kind of the questions we ask, because right now we're bound by the contract that the teachers get their 45-minute time when the students go to a special, but does it have to be that way? Is that the only way to provide a prep time for a teacher? Or are there more creative, innovative ways that will allow our special area teachers to not be a drop-off, but be an integrated part of the general education?
If I could take that a step further, I'd like to. Just thinking about as far as, do we, and not saying we don't need a music room or an art room or world language room, but will those specials continue to be in those rooms? Can they be in one of our alternate learning spaces? Can they be in a classroom? Can this be something that we're co-teaching with a specialist and your classroom teacher? So it's really kind of opening up our eyes to, what, we've done this, it's been successful. What is that very next step? Which brings us to our extracurricular clubs. And it says student interest and passion. I also want to talk about teacher passion as well. Because what we'd like to do is we'd like to meet our students where they are with passions and give them opportunities for things they really have interest in. But yet we'd also like for our teachers to be able to share their passions outside of their classroom. We've done all these passion projects where teachers are sharing what they get joy from and what they want to pass on. And that's being mainly done within their class or grade level or a buddy class or through a co-teach. Why not open it up to the school for an extracurricular activity? And then the students can learn more, like we have, say, in PBC in the high school, from a teacher and their passion outside of your regular school day.
We will be looking to assess what is the potential, the need or the practicality of doing some multi-age classrooms, depending on what our students need and what our teachers are interested in doing. So that's something we'd like to explore. And back to the passions, is there a way to build into our schedule a period, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, where teachers can teach based on their passion, and any grade, any child could attend that period or that class to learn something more about something that they're interested in. So you could have a fourth grade teacher who has some second, first, and third grade going to them for that period to learn about something new and interesting and kind of spark an interest in a child.
And then we've talked about all these fantastic spaces that we have and we want to have. We're really looking forward to our new courtyard, which is going to be out by our kindergarten wing, between, if you draw that triangle behind CT with the first grade wing, second grade wing, and kindergarten wing. Really looking forward to that space and what that could be. We talked a lot about our house system. We could have an entire house or even two houses out there. We can have performances held there. We could do things across different classes, bring in a first, second, third, fourth grade class all at the same time. So just once again, a different place, an outdoor learning space. We all know our students love to work outdoors. This is going to give us the options now. What can we do with that space? But not only for CT, not only for our students, not only for our staff, but also for the community. It's a great place for the community to come after school hours and use that area as well. So we're looking to spread it into the community and also take advantage of it from, during the school day or after the school day with our own students.
And the final point is something that when we met with Jared just yesterday to talk about that vision for the future of CET, we want to use the innovation model that we've used in the district in the past. But one of the things that came to us was, is there a way to create either a capstone or a culminating CET experience where kids get some exposure to something each year, but it builds towards something that they have as a culminating project or a culminating experience. So again, very preliminary, but when we were talking, we're like, it would be really neat. I mean, here we are on the banks of the Hudson. We have a big sign in our school that says Stewards of the Hudson. Well, why don't we really embrace that and have opportunities for our kids to have different experiences with the Hudson River, all their years at CET, but have it culminate in some experience that is built on a shared experience that all of the kids have. So these are just some of the things that pop into our heads.
On that last one, you're thinking more of a culminating experience, more, I guess, staff defined as opposed to like what we may have it.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so you
I
maybe-
would not pigeonhole us into that at all.
Okay, so if we have within the general theme of, let's say, the Hudson River,
It could be anything.
it could be anything.
Could be
which kids could-
transportation, could be animals, could be the impacts on the environment. It could be why this community grew the way it did, but I do like the idea of, because the Hudson is so readily accessible to us and our kids can see that and it's tangible, different experiences that they can, I just threw that as an example, not
Okay.
anything that we're pigeonholed into at all. So that concludes our portion of the presentation. Any questions? Thank you for the opportunity.
I
Yeah.
just want to say this. I'm really impressed with the thought and care that you've given in this, but it sort of strikes me in a way, and this is not a negative. Like when you look at the state, and the state talks about the budget, what also gets added into the budget bill is all these things that are really programmatic, right? Where they say, we should change this law and that law, I'm gonna stick it in the budget bill. And this is sort of like that and sort of not like that, because you're really thinking about what you can do that may not have a lot of cost, whether it's 24, 25 and beyond, or even the ones you talked about, that really have kind of less the significant budgetary impact, but more the impact on students. And, you know, I think it's a different way to look to prepare a budget. And I see a nodding over there because it's really talking about, you know, how we move forward as a system without just thinking about the numbers.
Mhm.
Then the budget numbers are important, but I really like how
I'm
you've
glad that
done that.
I'm glad that that's evident, because that's the goal. Like, we're looking to improve and enhance our student experiences and our faculty experiences. And yes, there will be budgetary implications,
Absolutely.
but it's not something that we can't do in a cost-effective way, right, Denise?
Yeah.
Yes.
But as we think about in the future, what this experience is gonna look like for our students, we also have to keep in the back of our mind, what is this gonna cost? And we need to start planning for that now, because we wanna build that genuine experience for our students. We wanna give them that great experience that everybody here in Croton wants, but also, you know, like we said, we kind of need to be mindful about where we wanna go. And it's not all set in stone now, but we also need to keep in mind that there is gonna be a price tag attached to that, and getting these ideas on the table now and putting these thoughts out there about what school can be, certainly is a conversation about experience and money, and it's that balance.
Just one other observation, and Craig, this is really for you because you've been in the building for a long time. I recall the objection and concern about the art on a cart, right? And when we really had space limitations and therefore
Right.
we didn't have the art room where it is now, we didn't have the music room where it is now, and you know that there were, you know, staff who felt kids suffered because they didn't have an art room. So I think as we're talking about, particularly talking about the ITAD model, I don't think we really would be able to reclaim space, because I can see that sometimes things would be in a
Absolutely.
classroom.
I think it's a balance.
Sometimes the kids would go to the art room or the music room or, you know, the gym or whatever it is. And you'd really have, you know, you can't say, well, we're gonna take that and make it in another classroom because.
Yeah, so to be
Right.
clear on, because we're being recorded, and I don't want Brie or Marlena watching this and thinking, oh my God, you're taking away that was not what we were saying.
No.
We were saying, how can those spaces, maybe they're used by the art and music teacher together, maybe we're not looking to put
Not every
anybody on a
music
cart.
class is in the music room.
Right.
Maybe it's better suited in our kindergarten area outside, what's gonna be our amphitheater. Maybe
Sure.
it's better suited down in our collaborative workspace in the fourth grade wing. But you throw out something
Creating
interesting.
options is
I'm
what
sorry,
I'm.
creating options. But when you think about it, you talk about art on the cart, right? And where we've kind of been and where we're going. You remember we had art on the cart. We also had combined grade 1, grade 2 classes. We had a 2-3 class. We had a 4-5 class. And so it's kind of all coming back full cycle as we kind of see where we've been and where we want to go. So a lot of those ideas are things that were once present in Croton schools are going to show up in a different form.
Anyone else have any other questions for Great? I did actually have a quick question, and it might be more Denise's question back on that, those initial budget slides. I noticed there was a big increase on the, it should be counseling services line. Is that due to like reallocation from other budget lines, or is
Yeah,
that?
so point of clarification. Previously, we had student support services through a contracted service that was budgeted in psychological services.
Okay,
So that other service, the contracted service, has been removed, and now that line for the bilingual school counselor is in guidance services.
gotcha.
And that brings that to about a 1.6 FTE for that.
So it's really
Yeah,
just,
it was
Yeah.
a reallocation there.
Gotcha.
so you put those together, it's about a $28,000 increase of psychological and guidance. But that's
It's
why,
actually a decrease when you offset what we were paying to an outside provider for those services compared to the allocation.
and then the fact that those numbers are higher is because of the additional staff.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Sarah.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
For the
Thank you.
opportunity.
And next up to talk about how people personnel services will help to continue with vision what school can be, Assistant Superintendent for PBS, Rachel.
I'd like to begin with the fact that although I am wearing cheetah, I am in fact a tiger. I have no tiger print available this time. So Omar, it's not 1% this year. Last year it was at 1%, remember? I got some kudos. This year, we're doing big things over in PBS. Okay, so to speak about our finances here and what our proposed budget entails, you will see there is an increase, 5.9% overall in the department. So some of the factors that are contributing to the increase, if you look at salaries, within that salary is now our community aid worker. So she started mid-year, she started in about January, Eva Thaddeus. So her salary is incorporated into our salary line for PPS. We have added 4 additional classroom aides due to the anticipated incoming kindergartners that will be visiting our Spark program, either full-time or part-time, which is our non-integrated class, K-1. We also have our interventionist at PVC. That salary is also incorporated into the PPS department salary. If we look at our BOCES, you'll see there's a 29% decrease. We have some students aging out and some students moving through different programs. So a BOCES program may not have had the level of support that a student needed. So you'll see there's almost a comparable increase at tuition for private programs. So more of our therapeutic programs are private day schools. So we have had some shifting there, but also with tuition, as you know, with special ed, it's a moving target, as Denise always says. So we definitely build in contingencies there to anticipate a need for students that require placement outside of their least restricted environment. Our tuition for residential, we build in a contingency. At this point, we do not have any students in residential, but a residential student is a large sum of money. So we want to ensure that we have allocated an appropriate amount to be available in the event that there is a CSE recommendation for a student that needs to attend a residential placement. Our OCS is, what does OCS stand for?
Other contractors.
Oh, other contractors. Is that where our SAS counselor was? In that line? Okay.
And if it's
So-
one acronym, you don't.
I know. As Denise had alluded to, we were previously using a staff member from an agency, but we are converting that position into a CTA position. So we reallocated part of that, funding or allocation into our salary line. As far as supplies, there is also an increase there. For many of you, you may not know that we have about 24 AED machines across the district. So they are becoming obsolete. They're no longer manufacturing some of the parts, the replacement pads, or the charging conductors. So it forces us to update and upgrade the model. And because we need 24, and it's a pretty hefty sum of about $40,000 at an estimated price right now for those replacement machines. So we are going to be replacing them in a 3-phase process. So over the course of the next 3 years, we're going to replace the oldest, most needy machines with new ones, and we'll do that over the course of the next 3 years. So phase 1 is built into our supplies and other budget line for that. So as I mentioned, we also built in contingencies for students. So this is just a visual representation of the breakdown of our budget. Okay, so this is time where we celebrate what we've done over the course of this past school year. And there are so many things to celebrate. So if you remember this diagram from my budget presentation last year, these were the foci that the department had. So we wanted to incorporate more specialized programs for our students, our program students. We wanted to embed therapeutic supports in to meet the needs of our at-risk and our students that are emotionally dysregulated or require a higher level of intervention for their emotionality, as well as our community family liaison. So we have seen success across all 3 of these initiatives. So our specialized programs, I have over 22 referral packets from other private districts. for our specialized program. Thank you. So every day we're getting new referrals from other public schools because what we're doing in our Spark 1 and our Spark 2, our Aspire and our 9th grade cohort is a lot different from what other public school districts can provide. And part of that is building the capacity of our staff. So this year was like year 1, you know, getting them introduced to certain populations that they may have not been comfortable or familiar with working with. So we have consultants coming in, we use the staff that we have that have, you know, experienced some professional learning that they could come in and share with the team to really enhance the capacity and make these programs the most meaningful for our students. Our embedded therapeutic supports, our consulting psychiatrist comes once a month. She visits each school. She has one-on-one time with our school psychologists to speak about some of our at-risk students or just consult and kind of have a collegial conversation with them to give some guidance, support to families. She makes calls to families to try to connect them with resources. Additionally, she conducts the psychiatric evaluations that we require to make more informed decisions at the CSC. So her presence has made a great impact on our clinical team. We're incorporating our school counselors into tomorrow's session, where we're going to start having conversations about race and how to work with students that are experiencing challenges, you know, with peers. So I'm looking forward to that session tomorrow. But some of the other topics she's done, suicide awareness. So our clinicians are now trained to do suicide risk assessments for students, the Columbia model. She has done motivational interviewing. Sometimes our clinicians are with students that just don't want to talk, right? They just go through the motions of attending. So they're learning techniques to really meet the child where they are and kind of elicit the participation and get the kids to open up and talk a little bit more deeply in those sessions. Anxiety we've done, and she's also working on developing some parent workshops for the late spring. So she's really been impactful in really creating capacity and building confidence among our teams. She'll come and do a debrief with me. She's like, Rachel, you have a phenomenal team. I said, I know. Just keep them happy. Just keep them happy. For those of you that have met Ava, and I think you may have the night she was appointed, and you may have just within the community and your visits at the schools. She has really taken the bull by the horns with her work with our non-English speaking families. We started off, I kind of laid out the plan, what I envision her role to be, but it has morphed and I am fine with it. I received a call from a counselor that one of our families was being displaced on the 29th of February. I texted her, I said, I need you to reach out to them, see what they need. So she and I were communicating that entire night, trying to get DSS involved. We called the Coachman Homeless Shelter. You know, we called the landlord to see if in fact that was the case because we were unsure if it was maybe miscommunicated or misinterpreted. And it was. So we were doing a lot of the work to prepare for this family that we had anticipated being displaced, but it really opened up, I guess, an understanding of what the resources are available and how Eva can help support families really in any type of circumstances. She's hands-on with our Spanish-speaking registration. She's really taken, you know, a lead in the kindergarten registration for our Spanish-speaking families. We knew, you know, a small amount of them because they're in our UPK program or they receive CPSE services. So I gave her that list first. I said, reach out, make appointments to meet with the families to get them registered. Since it's an online registration platform now, it is a bit tedious. So she sits with them with laptops and works through getting all the information uploaded and entered. So it's working out beautifully. It's working out beautifully. Next slide. So as you all know, PBS is the umbrella. We're like a catch-all. So we do everything. I did an oil change and a tire rotation this morning. So like I said, everything. So our goal is really to refine the programs that we have and just continue to increase and improve the experiences of our students with disabilities and at-risk students and our students with that are English language learners. Okay. So some of our areas of focus for the upcoming school year, which is evident in our budget and our path forward. We want to establish a more structured executive functioning program. We do have a study skills program at PVC, and we'll be building that into our schedule at the high school for next year to really distinguish the students that have low academic abilities that require specialized instruction, which would typically be done in a resource room, and then to focus on the students that really need planning, organization, study skills. So to identify a program and a structure to develop lessons and execute instruction in the study skill space. Looking at refining, continuing to refine, because we could always be better, we could always do more. Our programs for students with autism and developmental delays. Looking at increasing and kind of expanding our supports for multi-language learners and the supports that their families could benefit from too, through the school community. Looking at both therapeutic and intervention supports across our school, and meeting the needs of our incoming kindergartners, which I heard are a little bunch of little wolves. So this is just some pictures that, you know, the staff had shared with me. Our Aspire program working with Mr. Malloy and Indy. We have our Spark One program. One of our students is doing a read aloud in that. And then I guess that's our 5th grade team at PBC on the flexible learning space. So how many of you are familiar with MTSS?
Multi-tiered systems of support.
Read the room. So as many of you may know, back in 2007, New York State required all school districts to have an RTI policy approved, RTI plan submitted to the state, and to really build a structure for intervention for at-risk learners. Because there are interventions that can be put in place before a child is referred to the Committee on Special Education. So RTI is evolving into MTSF. So when we look at RTI as a structure, it's tiered levels of intervention. The expectation is 80% of students will get exactly what they need from the whole group instruction in the classroom. 15% of students will need something a little bit different, right? Something a little bit more targeted. And 5% of students need something intense. The frequency needs to be high, as Kerry was mentioning with our AIS plans for next year. So it's a tiered level of support for students that are at risk. MTSS is meant for all learners. And it's 3 domains. We're looking at supports for academics, students that are at risk academically, students that are at risk behaviorally, where those behaviors may interfere with the learning, and students that are at risk for social emotional and require social emotional supports within the school environment. Even though social emotional and behavioral sound the same, there's more internal and external behaviors that you take into account when you're looking at categorizing those types of behaviors. So we have established a steering committee, representatives from all 3 buildings in the district level, in looking at what we are doing well with RTI and through our AIS programs, and how we can build upon that to create a structure of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support in the district across schools with consistency. So that is our goal. We've met 1 or 2 times, and, you know, our staff has gone out to some professional development at BOCES, doing some independent work, some actual passion work as it relates to tiered intervention. So we are on the right track. And it's something that's going to take us a while to get to, but the staff in the buildings are becoming more familiar with the term multi-tiered systems of support, you know, looking at criteria and exit criteria from groups, because those groups are meant to be fluid to maximize the staffing. You know, as Kerry was saying, not all kids can choose if they have a need in math and ELA, they kind of have to choose at one point because the staffing wasn't enough to support all needs. But with MTSS, we look to increase effectiveness and efficiency of the resources that we have. Good evening. So our budget is geared towards meeting the needs of MTSS. So as I had mentioned, the tiered support for all students, we looked at it when we were kind of proposing what we wanted to plan for in the upcoming school year across buildings. We needed to be responsive to students' needs and social, emotional, and behavior supports, but also proactive, and then targeting the academics that students are struggling with. our little ones. Okay, so when thinking about both responsive and proactive approaches to social, emotional, and behavioral needs, we're looking at increasing therapeutic supports at CET. So for those of you that may not know, we have an increasing number of kindergarten through fourth graders that are experiencing high levels of anxiety, school phobia or school avoidance, dysregulation, just really not dealing with big emotions and not having the coping strategies to deal with those emotions. So we're looking to establish something similar to our flex space at PVC and the high school, which is it's a space for students to really go and just kind of regroup and reset, with clinical supervision or staffing in that program. So if you know about the flex program here, we have a full-time SPED teacher and a full-time school psychologist. PVC has a full-time special education teacher and an aide, but stop-ins from our clinical team. So we're looking to establish something in year one, something more like the PVC model, because it'll be more of a stop-in. It's not meant to be a permanent, holding space for a student. It's to really work with the student, do some mindfulness exercises, do some DBT, the dialectical behavioral therapy, to really help the student identify the emotions, identify appropriate and positive ways to work through those emotions so that they're available to learn and get back to the classroom. So embedded in that, as I had mentioned, counseling and crisis response. Our staff is certified in TCI, Therapeutic Crisis Intervention Training, looking at establishing this program where there's a psychiatric consultation embedded in the program, available to all students, classified and not classified. And the goal is to reintegrate them into their academic schedule. So if they need some time during the transition to just regroup, that's the time. We've been using Spark for that, but we're noticing that at times these pop-ins are interfering with the learning. They're in the middle of a lesson and then Johnny comes in and he's, so it interferes with the learning. So we're looking to identify a more dedicated space for this profile of student. So our bilingual social worker. So we've heard our clinicians and our counselors, they feel that a social worker is needed here because there's a lot of referrals and community connection work that needs to be done here in Croton. So we've identified the need we want a bilingual school psychologist because we need, school social worker, because we are working with a lot of multi-language learners that are coming in. Some of these students have experienced trauma in their travels here to Croton and to the United States. And it's apparent when we're seeing them really trying to engage in the learning, but they're not available emotionally. So we're hoping that this work with a social worker and having this bilingual social worker, and that will be allocated across all three buildings. So we're looking at establishing 0.6 at CET, where we have the highest number of newcomers and new arrivals, and then allocating a 0.2 for at least the initial introduction of the position over the course of the next year. So that person will also be looking at providing clinical support in the flex space at CET, working with our newcomers and our families, our MLL families, and supporting MTSF, the behavioral social emotional component at all three schools, and partnering with the currently assigned clinicians at each building. So our second addition and proposed addition to support us with our multi-tiered systems of support work is an interventionist. PVC right now, it does have a high number of students with disabilities. And probably the largest disability category that we have here in the district is learning disabled. And it's typically a specified disorder in reading or writing. So we are looking for an interventionist that is both duly certified in special education students with disabilities, grades 5 to 9 or 1 to 6. We're still looking for the right candidate to kind of fit them into the position, but duly certified, because we need someone to act as an interventionist for the at-risk students. And then additionally, work with our students with disabilities and that growing population that has a reading-based disorder. So we're looking for that person to provide evidence-based literacy interventions to the at-risk students, support our special education students in special education program. And part of this thinking and this proposal was because one of our special education teachers from PVC had been assigned to the high school .2 this year because of her certification. We needed this type of certification here. But with the rising eighth graders, we're seeing a need for another .2. So she would be here for a total of .4. So we need to be sure that we can cover the needs at PVC as relates to special ed programming. So this new interventionist that will be duly certified will be both working with students with disabilities and at-risk students while coaching and supplying classroom teachers with evidence-based strategies that are going to meet the needs of those at-risk learners struggling with literacy. So some of the efficiencies. So some of our high-cost students are graduating. They're graduating with Regents diplomas. We've had their exit meetings this week. They're happy. They're going to some really great colleges, and parents are excited, students are excited, and some of the students have actually said, I'm so glad that I landed here in the space where they were. So that was definitely a celebration for them. Some of the stipulations for that were our stipulation agreements are commencing this year because 2 of those students are also graduating. So we've fulfilled our obligation through the agreement.
So
So,
stipulations commencing.
well, they're moving out. They're finishing. They're
Okay, so what you really
They're
mean is
concluding. Thank
stipulations
you.
are
You
concluded.
know how many eyeballs are on this and nobody recommended that? Okay.
All right, but
Like, who's the picture to the left? Look, the bold here.
Not center.
Concluding, Josh, thank you, sir.
I knew what you
And-
meant.
Me too, although I just saw the transmission.
And then, as you know, my goal was for more students to remain in a leadership environment, which is a community school, and we are achieving that. So, I believe that is it. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Theo.
I just had a question about the bilingual social worker, which I think is a great idea. One thought I had was, given that the kind of the sharing in between for all 3 buildings, I was wondering kind of like the challenge of finding a professional who can work across the age ranges. But then I guess then I just took a step back and started wondering about like, what is the actual work they're doing? How much of it is, I assume a lot of it is directly with students, but also potentially with families and trying to find supports, et cetera. So can you just talk a little bit more about how you foresee this, I guess, finding the right person that can work across the age ranges in the different situations, and a little bit more about what the job description actually is.
So when I review resumes, I look for like key experience. So when you look for a clinical social worker, you look for someone that's worked in a clinic and has clinical experience, or at least has done their externship or a year or 2 in a clinic-based or center-based program. You're working across the lifespan there. Certification for social worker is not grade banded. It's school social worker, so essentially it's K through 12. So I look hard at resumes. Like I look for those key characteristics that I'm looking for in a staff member. So looking at their experience and their knowledge of the community is another big factor. You know, I always need someone to hit the ground running, you know, because they need to be familiar with the available resources so that they can make referrals immediately. They may walk in and need to make a referral for, you know, clinical work, like they need a private therapist, they need a dentist, they need an attorney. So having someone that has a breadth and depth of experience is essential for this position and to work here in Croton. So again, it's based on experience. You know, there are some providers that I've seen in some of the applications that we've gotten resumes, they have 12 to 20 years of experience in social work. So we just need to make sure it's the right type of experience that's applicable to the needs of our community. And then you had mentioned about the being across buildings. If we look specifically at our MLL population, a lot of the families have kids across buildings. So building that connectedness with the family, so that they can meet the needs of all students, whether they be across 2 or 3 buildings or at one building, that's going to be part of their job. It's building relationships to build the trust so that the families know that they have an ally, which, Eva is doing now in her work, but we want to definitely continue to build. And this bilingual social worker is not, designated to or assigned to work exclusively with our non-English speaking families and or ELS or MLL students, but their skill set may be accessed across every building. Counselors may just need some, information or referral or things like that. So hopefully that answered your question.
It does.
Yeah. Did you have, pardon me, Omar, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Greg, can you go back to the CET slide, behavioral, intervention, support services?
I think it was right that, no.
Nope. One more. There we go.
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about the support services in the other buildings as it relates to, the need at CET and the increase, social emotional, challenges students are facing nationwide, not just in Kirkland. Are the services we have in place sufficient?
So right now, I would say that CET is in the greatest need of additional supports to meet the demands of the growing population. At EBC, there's 2 full-time psychologists, 2 full-time counselors. High school, 3 counselors, 2 full-time psychologists. CET, who has a higher enrollment number than the 2 buildings, has 1 school counselor, 1 school psychologist. So we want to provide that additional support because if 5-year-olds, they are coming in hot. They are coming in hot. So there's definitely a need for those younger, intervention on the lower grade.
Thank you for clarifying.
And if I could just say that to be early intervention, especially when it comes to social emotional needs, is key. The sooner that we can help and support our students, the
Better the
better.
outcomes.
So that's what we're hoping to really do.
Yeah, so I understand, I think, what we've talked about in terms of the bilingual social worker. But I also know that what you described with our community aid person was doing what was really social work in that example. So I'm wondering, how do you differentiate the work being done if we have these 2 people, by, what they're gonna do, how they overlap and how they have to serve a different role?
So we envision it to be more Eva being the entry point, right? Because she's supporting these newcomer entering families at the initial stage of registering, introducing them to staff at the school. That's where, because Eva has a very good way of assessing need and opening that line of communication to, with families. So they may share with her a need that she can refer to the school social worker. So, but
After they've been.
after they've been
If they,
entered,
after they've come
registered.
in,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Usually, but not always beginning of the year, then there will be some other functions that you envision Eva
Absolutely.
performing, which is different than the social.
Oh,
work function. If
absolutely.
you
The
could-
social worker is
talk to
working more through a clinical lens, right? Assessing need, and that's in partnership with the ENL teachers.
Mhm.
Janet, Catherine, Amy, Anarelli. So it's really they're going to develop like a wraparound, these families. They're gonna be able to wrap around these families' resources, both academic in Croton, surrounding districts, right? Based on need. So I think that establishing that structure is going to be very supportive for our non-English speaking families coming in.
It looks almost like we've got 2 folk for that function who are sitting in the same room, have different skills, working together
Absolutely.
or in a coordinated manner to meet the needs of multi-language learners
Yeah.
and others.
Yeah. And as the roles and their time in the community, evolves, we'll be able to really refine, their functions to meet the needs. The needs are ever changing, ever changing. I forgot the last one. Yeah, so looking ahead, something we've been talking about, establishing a family resource center. In my previous, district, we had a family community center, housed in one of our high schools. So there was a social worker available to, meet families in the evening, they staggered their hours, so they were available after work. They did some training there, resources, they were able to have representatives from other community agencies available to kind of, tap into for support. So that's something that we're envisioning long-term here in Croton, and that's to support all Croton families. Partnerships with local mental health providers, since COVID, actually, there's less and less mental health providers and agencies available. There's a year wait list for WJCS, the Westchester County Westchester Jewish Community Centers. That's a long time for a child that's in crisis now. So there's definitely a need for us to, establish these partnerships where hopefully Croton families can get priority in some of these instances. Looking at MLL, multi-language family academies, something that I have been passionate about, bringing parents to learn alongside their children, right, in a dual language type of program, helping support families in supporting their children's academics and their success in school. Over time, we'd love to have a full-time community aid worker. Right now, she's doing about 20 to 24 hours a week. And right now it's seasonal for her because she does, have another obligation, but she's maximizing the time that she's here, but we'd love to have someone full-time here. Looking to establish more applied behavioral analysis based programs. So ABA is good for students on the spectrum and students with behavioral needs. So looking to build capacity of our staff so they can embed this methodology within their class is a long-term goal for us as well. And building capacity of staff through embedded professional learning opportunities, consultations, professional coaches coming in. So these are some of the long-term plans that we have for the PPS department. Thank you.
Just want to thank you for taking the time to explain so much of that, because for somebody who doesn't work in education, so much of it is a lot of
Acronyms.
yeah. So thank you for that. I was also pleased to read last night in the village's actual proposed budget, they were talking about adding a part-time social worker, community worker. So as I see looking ahead to family resource centers, I see other, hopefully countywide agencies also trying to meet the needs of everything.
That's cool.
I don't know what an interventionalist is. I would just love it if you could, if
Sure.
you described other things, describe that.
So because they wouldn't be completely a special education teacher, that would be their tenure area, but it wouldn't be the function or their responsibilities. So an interventionist is someone that provides intervention. They do something a little bit differently than what's being done in the class to meet the child where they are and to promote progress.
But not a crisis.
No,
like that. Okay, 'cause I
like
was thinking
academic
academic.
intervention, like AIS is academic intervention services,
Right.
AIS, so the I of that, we've just kind of tagged on, we may come up with a more craftier name once we find someone to do the position,
Yeah.
but essentially their job is to provide interventions to at-risk students while providing specialized instruction to our students with disabilities in the sections that need to be covered.
And that's like that
FPDC.
tier 2 that you were talking
Tier
about?
3,
Tier
tier
3.
3.
Yeah,
So-
paying attention.
Yeah. And again, we have to look at scheduling and the needs and how many students fall within those tiers, through our diagnostic assessments that are administered. But when you look at tier 3 intervention, and I'll give you an example. A student cannot be classified as a student with a learning disability if they have not had a multi-sensory, multi-year literacy intervention program provided by a certified interventionist, meaning someone that's certified in the area of need literacy. So looking to have someone that's qualified, has a skill set that may be a bit more enhanced than a special educator is essential. It's essential. So that's, it's someone that's just providing the intervention, something a little bit differently to support those at-risk students.
Thank you.
You mentioned that we've seen a significant uptick in the number of elementary level students that have significant social emotional needs outside the norm. Do we have a sense, is there any commonality in that in terms of causation or anything like that, that we should be flagging in some way, or anything that we should be doing earlier in, say, K1 to help mitigate or prevent?
So the highest number of kids that are experiencing these difficulties are kindergarten and first
Yep.
graders. These are kids that their early developmental stage was impacted by COVID.
Okay.
In front of a television while parents had to work at home, you know, on an iPad, they don't want to give up the iPad, you know, so there's a lot of behavioral characteristics
I see.
that just as a team, we've discussed, we're like, wow, but it's regional. Every day, we're getting so many referrals for 5-year-olds in need of a specialized program due to emotionality, and they need adult support for the whole school day. You know, so it's a regional need, so that's why we kind of hypothesize that, you know, lack of social interaction, demands were lessened during this period of time where they were, you know, on a modified schedule home most of the time.
Got
So
it.
that's the biggest attribute, and some anxiety, and, you know, there are several students with diagnoses of anxiety, which trigger those big responses in the school setting when demands and boundaries are placed. One thing I did not say this evening, and I will say for Steve Walker, Duchess. He says I talk too much about Duchess, so I didn't speak about it this evening.
I just hate that.
I can't talk about it.
No,
She's the best.
No budgetary impact.
No, but thank you, I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Rachel?
Just a quick thing, on the MLL Family Academies, it would pique my interest, because, I mean, like, it sort of reminded me of like the community schools models, like sort of supporting whole families in the way via the schools, and I was just wondering whether you had put any thought as to like what it actually looks like. Is it like English language learning? Is it like, you know, other kinds of learning alongside children? Like, is there any more
Done it
kind of
before.
detail about
I've
that?
done it before. It was our ENL Family Academy. It ran Saturdays for cohorts of like 12 weeks. So it was multi-purpose. So it would target students in grades 3 to 8 to give them some test prep, you know, outside of the school day in a much smaller group. Their parents would also attend. I would facilitate the parent academy portion where we were teaching English, teaching job readiness skills, how to complete a job application, a resume, looking at how to look for jobs. So honestly, I was very flexible. Whatever the parents asked for, I did for them. But then part of that Saturday was where they would push into the class with their kids and work side by side with them. So teacher would teach them, they would teach their the kids would teach their parents. So that was just one model that I'm familiar with. And I think it would be a nice foundation for work if we look at Family Resource Center, because then we could expand that into more of a community school model where, you know, health centers, mental health providers, you know, all types of support through the community and the agencies that we have available could be present and support in their own way.
So question about those three things you talked about, first three bullets, is really a matter of, well, in my mind, not that I'm opposed to anything, it's a question of funding. You know, I'm thinking to the south of us in Osseta and to the north of us in Peekskill. They've done a lot of work in this area, but I'm guessing that given the demographics of those communities, resources, grants, so on, are much more available than they would be to programs. Is that accurate, or do we think that given the changing nature demographically of our community, those resources might become available or might be becoming available from state or federal sources because it's a need that's realized, you know, throughout many communities? What do you see?
So I know that, you know, we have a very small allocation for our Title III, which is for our multi-language and our English language learners. But as our population is growing, we're hoping that the allocation will match the growing, population. But I work with Denise very closely with the grants, and that is not enough funding to sustain or get off the ground those, it's really the first and the third, I think, because partnerships doesn't cost us anything, you know, but there's always grants available if you know where to look. You know, now there's a the school-based mental health clinic grant that hopeful, you know, a lot of people are looking to do, but startup costs, you know, there's a startup cost associated with that they'll provide 25,000, but then
So a lot more than
sustained by
25,000.
general, right,
Yeah.
sustained by general fund. So it's looking for the right funding stream, you know, and volunteers, you know, so there's a lot of ways that we could make this happen, you know, but it's definitely with planning and collaboration amongst community, school, families.
There are no other questions. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. Next up, PVC, Michael and Nicole.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate the time to speak about our budget. Last year, we sat here and we talked about some things with you. We talked about passion projects and future focused assessments. We spoke about our music program and we spoke about a lot of different things that at that time, they weren't concretized. We didn't know what they would turn out to be. And here we talk to you tonight with a sense of success that those things were implemented and implemented at a middle school. A middle school that, like every other middle school in the country, has many distractions from goals, right? When dealing with kids and putting out the daily fires. But those distractions did not deter us from getting to our goals and making sure that our students experience that. Tonight, we want to talk about not just this budget cycle, but how now that we've gotten past the initial goals that we set for last year and attained them, how we see the budgetary process in multi-year chunks, because we know where we want to go. We know what we know what our destiny should look like. And one of the things that I would say is a destiny statement is what schools can be. And to better understand that, it has to do with reimagining learning, pursuing passions, and the continuance of the creating a culture of well-being. Destiny is not a matter of chance in this case. It's a matter of choice, just like a school budget. It's a matter of choice because that's what a budget is. It's about planning and never losing sight of one's vision. So when we speak tonight, we want you to know that we're thinking about not just the 2024-25 school year. We're thinking about the years beyond that as well. Next slide, please. So this budgetary slide, Rachel explained a lot of it to you, which is great, which is I'm really happy she went before me and not after. But basically what you can see is the things that Rachel spoke about, the interventionist and so forth, shows an increase in expenditures. The one thing Rachel didn't talk about that's reflected here is the 0.4 increase in our PE position at the middle school. That'll benefit the middle school and the high school. But it also reflects some decreases here, which should be indicative of fiscal responsibility. And it means that we're ensuring that the monetary allocations align with our mission and vision, and we're not being frivolous with the taxpayers' money. These numbers make more sense when you go through our presentation this evening, and these conceptual things, we'll speak about them in more concrete ways. So this pie chart here, next slide, please. No, that was it. Almost like dancing to a DJ there, which, yeah. You know, what this says to me as a middle school principal is an appropriate balance of what a middle school should look like with our focus, with our level of services. And it demonstrates that we continually invest in the areas that serve kids, promote things like transdisciplinary learning, and support students' needs, which we know are very varied at this developmental level. Thank you. And so what we'll talk about is the three areas that we mentioned on our lead slide. Reimagine learning, And then we'll move on to pursuit of passions and of course, cultural well-being. One of the things that really helped us plan this year's budget and look at it 3 years out has been our vision map. So the vision map isn't just a good piece of PR. It turns out it's also a tool. And we want to talk about a couple of things on this slide and the other slides. We're not going to go through everything. We didn't make an exhaustive list. But what's really important is that these slides should demonstrate the trajectory that we're in. So for instance, co-teaching, we started that this year with 2 courses. We will have more courses next year that will be interdisciplinary and have more than one teacher working elbow to elbow together in guiding students, teaching students, coaching one another, as well as helping everyone in the school community grow. For instance, we're on the precipice of designing a course, a humanities course. We're also thinking in the years to follow that we will be offering elective courses for middle schoolers that are team taught. When I say team taught, I'm not talking about people on the same grade level team teaching that, but people with the same interests and passions teaching that. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and how we're able to do that when we go into flexible scheduling. But before we do that, let's just talk about flexible spaces. What we've seen this year is the transformation of traditional spaces to be more dynamic learning spaces. We've had great success in that, and we want to see that success continue. Whether it be the library, the lobbies, or many of the classrooms, we need to continue to invest in spaces throughout our facilities and grounds and support pedagogy, passion, curiosity throughout the school building and on our grounds. For instance, this year, the 5th and 6th grade, they got totally transformed. We have more diversity of seating. We've created more multi-use spaces within those classrooms and common areas. And what I really like about our vision and our destiny is it seems that our plans and our efforts will intersect well and perfectly with the coming online with the future facilities. And that is intentional. Learning technology. Last year I sat here and told you about Z-Space. We bought 4 machines. We are going to buy some more machines in this budget because of the use they've gotten and how they supported instruction. I'll never forget the first time that I saw a child who designed their own playground as part of a project, take it from CAD and put it on that 3D machine and what that was like. And we want more of that. We want a deeper dive into this as more teachers begin to use this and get to a place where we have a full class set and do it responsibly over time.
I think it's important to mention the student agency piece, not only in something like leveraging the technology, but also in something like the flexible spaces. And our 5th and 6th graders are designing those spaces, they're budgeting for those spaces, they're working hand in hand, collaboratively with each other, but with their teachers as well to really plan and design those spaces. And I think that's in the process of coming to fruition. We've seen some amazing transformation already, and there's plenty more where that came from, which is pretty exciting. And to be able to leverage the technology while doing that, I think it's just an added bonus.
And then also I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another piece that's indicative to the multi-year approach is our phasing in of the iPads and the phasing out of the Chromebooks. Dr. Blair has been great. Next year this year we have 5th grade using the iPads. Next year we'll have 5th and 6th using the iPads, and we'll be moving on from that. What's incredible about that is we're already seeing the fruits of that labor. We see projects being enhanced and learning being enhanced because of some of the tools that kids can access using that piece of technology opposed to a Chromebook. Last piece on this, and again, a multi-year goal. Rachel spoke about academic support areas. AIS has been enhanced over the course of several years. We went from no people to 1 person to 2 people to 4 people, all without really a financial burden. With the inclusion of the interventionist, I think we could really close the gap and get to the sweet spot of where we want to be. And in doing that, we could shift our priorities from, not that AIS isn't important in all the support, but looking into other areas of how we could strengthen our pedagogical model. And that would be through the addition in the 26, excuse me, let me just get my years right. In the 25-26 year of pedagogical professional coaching to align ourselves with the other two schools that have that.
I think in order to do any of that, though, we have to create a system, right, in which it'll all work, and that's kind of where our master schedule comes in, and we have a very good one, but we want to look at maybe potentially making a couple of adjustments that will enhance student experience and really kind of just reflect what we value and kind of put our money where our mouth is. So we believe that a couple minor tweaks to the schedule is what's best for kids moving forward. That's boring to look at, except if you're like Mark or myself maybe, but increasing the opportunity for intervention and support here in specialized reading, AIS resource rooms, study skills. We'll be able now to do all of that, or at least the majority of it, at different times of the day by just simply adjusting some of these lab periods. So that is a big piece for us. Collaborating with Building Planning Council, with our PTA, with Kerry and Craig. We talked a lot about that transition to fifth grade. And by adjusting the lab period in fifth grade, our fifth graders will be able to start the day in like a morning meeting type of style, more of a homeroom, which is something we had moved away from. So that's definitely an added bonus. And again, just meeting kids where they are. And the eighth grade schedule, if you notice, a lot of those core classes now will be at the latter part of the day after lunch. We think that's going to best prepare them to head to the high school for double blocks and those interdisciplinary learning experiences at the high school. So switching the 7th and 8th grade lunch will allow us to do that. So again, just some minor tweaks there. And the 7th grade now, double blocks, having 2 cores back to back allows us for a more block experience amongst the team, shifting their lunch a little bit later, but also meeting the adolescent brain where it is and not trying to shove all of that after lunch because, that has its pluses and minuses.
So what's important about this is, again, maintaining those learning blocks to promote transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary learning, to promote collaboration between students, adjustment of the lab period so that we can increase the availability of AIS throughout the school day and enhance our ability to respond and to intervene. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so the pursuit of passion obviously is a priority to us. We had a very exciting day at PBC where our 8th graders were able to present what they've been working on all year, and it was very rewarding to see. I think, like you said, concretized, is that the word? Concretized.
We can look it up.
I'm gonna check that out later, but yeah. So school-wide scheduling is definitely, something that we need to adjust in order to continue to.
Focus word.
Sometimes. So we want to build off our previous schedule, right, to enhance these opportunities and continue to design, right, learning that meets kids where they are, gives them a choice in the process, allows us to fiddle slightly with groupings and class sizes to just make sure we're supporting those learning excursions outside of the building, knowing that things don't have to happen in the classroom as we think they always, once did. I also want to give Dr. Blair a quick shout out, even though he's not here, his work, and thanks to Denise for supporting that. The data team at EduTech has been super, super helpful for us. Something that no one would ever see, but is really important to us is the merging of our infinite campus calendars for next year. And right now 5-6 is on one, 7-8 is on another. It's kind of laborious and odd. We have now worked to create one, and that has been a really massive undertaking. So they've been super helpful in making that happen. Yeah, so we can take a look at one other opportunity. Going back to the pursuing passions is aligning our time and our schedule in our day with, again, what we believe is important and what we aspire to be. So we've created what we'll call a period X, for lack of a better term at the moment, but really what we're doing here is creating an opportunity to align our time with what we value. And that's been passion projects this year for sure. But also, again, looking to the forward, what we aspire to be, what we want to offer our students, what we want to offer our staff. And so this adjustment really allows for staff and students to explore passions, potentially create electives moving forward, increases our advisory time with actually less interruption to the daily schedule, but increasing the amount of time we spend. So this in place allows us the potential to maybe do some multi-graded work within the advisories or continue to do that. We did experiment with that a little bit. Yep, and the elective piece, again, smaller groupings too, because it'll allow the entire staff to be free to students at the same time. So in the simplest of terms, it's a 1 hour delay schedule, but we're all in the building, right? So we can use that time flexibly, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, however we thought, we needed to. So with this in place, we can really explore, like we said, multi-graded, options, smaller groupings, more social emotional support, and really supporting the behaviors that promote learning and well-being that we've really tried to focus on so much this year. So we're excited about that potential change.
Could you go back 2 slides? I just want to see yeah, so. Right, because the period 1, right, is the longest, and you have 6th and 8th with the actual lab and AIS bench. Now, I'm just looking at the difference in the length of each period and how that computes to or connects to what we've been talking about in terms of trying to enhance the opportunity for support and lab work. Because some, looking at that, it's interesting. 7th, you've got listed 2 periods. Second and 4th period for lab, et cetera. The other grades have 1.
So 5th and 6th have 1, 7th and 8th both have 2.
Oh,
That's
7
the
and
same
8, I'm sorry.
rotation.
They both
One
have
of them is a lab, which could also include resource room or AIS or specialized reading.
I see.
The other is their world language rotation in 7th and 8th.
So in scheduling, you don't have all the kids necessarily in one place, so you have 3 different locations listed there to break down of the grade.
Sure, I'm just, I guess the longest period, to go 2 sides, if you were to go, that is first period.
Well,
But it
it's
would
the
be
first period, all
period
the
X,
same
right.
period. If it's period X, it would be, period X would happen before first period. So it allows us that time, but doesn't allow us to miss anything else the rest of the day.
Okay.
So
well,
we would still see everybody, yep. and
I
see
don't have them side by side,
Yeah.
but let's just go forward and we'll,
You got
we'll think about
I heard all night.
it.
All right, next slide. We're almost done. Obviously, this is very important at the middle school, focusing on security, comfort, psychological, emotional, and physical, well-being of students. Obviously, we aim to grow programs like flexible support. We want to continue to offer diverse experiences over the summer. 21 plus clubs at the middle school, intramurals at lunch. And if you've heard anything about the March Madness, it's a big underscore under the word madness. All right. But great stuff. But we also want to continue to work on our school climate in tandem with our district partners, to, work with consultants to see how we can strengthen our school culture and climate and combat things that are trends in our society. I also would be remiss to leave out the fact that, PVC Middle School is the home of the child nutrition program. And we support that, and we want to continue to support that because no good principal should ever go hungry. Last but not least, obviously, we're making great strides towards an effective multi-tiered system of support. And we've taken our first steps this year. And we know that over the next 2 and 3 years, this is going to be critical to continue that. Next slide, please. And, just to show us the bridge between where we were last year, where we are in our current state, it's very important to also point out that we have a clear vision of the horizon. I started to talk to you about destiny, and then it reminded me of the girl who sat next to me in 3rd grade. Her name was Destiny. I hope she's well. More importantly, is that our proposal tonight obviously aligns our vision with the financials of that. We've abandoned the practice of just looking at the budget in a silo, right, of 1 year and kind of look at it more of what does it look like over 3 or 4 years? Where are we going? We're confident that this year's budget is based on firm foundational material that we've set into place over the last 2 years. Moreover, we contend that this school year's budget will be foundational in its own right, getting us to where we want to go as a middle school. And one of the things that, we really want to fully develop as we move towards that horizon is what schools can be as new things develop and we realize new strengths that our faculty and our staff has. They say that the future is best predicted when you create it. We feel like we're in a really good spot to create the best future for our middle schoolers and our colleagues. That being said, I want to, really thank the board and our district colleagues who kind of inspire us to go out and to think this way and to do that. And most importantly, I want to, thank our faculty. They have been great in coming up with ideas, some of the ones that are reflected in our schedule and how we could do things like passion better. And none of this of what we do can be done alone. So we're part of a team and we just want to say a big shout out to that team tonight. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Questions for Michael in the poll?
Can we go back just a couple of slides to that SEL slide? I'm sorry, I can't remember everything that's.
Culture of well-being slide, yeah.
Yes, thank you. It was actually just back from the end, sorry, call it the wrong. I was just curious if you could speak a little bit about, because I know you went through this one very, very quickly. What you mean by restructuring advisory, what you're thinking there.
So based on the schedule, we'll have more time to do advisory. We also want more input, again, from students, from community members, and also, from maybe outside consultants about other ways. Advisory is going on its 15th year. We've organically, grew this, but I do think that like anything else, it helps to have outside eyes look on that and help us, develop curriculum and so forth and so on. So I think restructuring it would mean how much time we dedicate to it, what subject matter we allocate to that time, and also that aligns with the needs of the students and the needs of the overall school culture.
So if we're to use something like the period X for an advisory, let's say we do once a month, right? Instead of maybe typically right now we'll do maybe 2 on average, I'd say 2 a month. It's about 20-ish minutes. If we do 1 a month, right, at the 55 minutes, we could multi-grade kids, we could have staff travel a little bit further, right? We're not in a big rush to keep everybody where they are to get there, to hurry up and, talk for 15 minutes and then scramble to the next spot. We can move people around a little bit more, use some different spaces, and then, potentially kind of almost extend what's kind of going on in the house system, but with a more middle school appropriate lens, but keeping, different grades together, right? Moving people around and then being able to really dive into things, which we experimented with pretty successfully, I think about a month ago. And the kids, like 8th graders were teaching 6th graders, 7th graders were teaching 5th graders. We couldn't get them back to class after that. They were like, we want to hang out with them all day. But to have more time is something I feel like everyone's been asking for. Makes sense.
Can I ask, what is the, I don't know this acronym, the BTPL?
The behaviors that promote learning
That's right.
and wellness, yes.
Thank you.
So obviously, we look at those as academic standards, but they're also social emotional standards. So obviously, this is the first year we rolled them out. They're part of our report cards. It's not something we're letting our sights off of. And we know that we're going to use that momentum to continue to, build on that. This is the first time in PVC history where kids had a chance to tell their teachers what they think they should receive on their report cards. Building in that piece of voice is an ongoing conversation about student growth. And having the student at the center of that conversation is very important. And again, not something that has been included in many traditional settings.
And again, building in the time to explicitly teach those, right? Not just talk about them on occasion, but to explicitly teach them along with the expected outcomes, I think is huge.
I was just gonna ask a quick question about how you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how do you
Please do.
envision? Okay, then I will. How do you envision measuring school climate? Because I say this as a parent of 3 PVC students, they have 3 very unique experiences every single day.
And look, it's really difficult, right? Because we're dealing with an age group that everything is, catastrophic, and the things that maybe should be catastrophic are no big deal. And we know our clientele, but I do think that there's tools that could be used, climate surveys, and we've used some of them in the past when it came to bullying, right? And things like that, like the Pride survey and other things like that. So I do think looking at a climate survey would be a good step. I also think talking to certain consultants in the field would be a good step. to help us, let us know what tools are available and other things are available. I also think that there are really great things to speak about. Like, you know, while every middle school has its problems, I would say that I feel very glad to have the ones we do, in a way, right? We don't have violence in our schools at a high level as other schools do, but we still have work to do. And I want to figure out ways to do that work most efficiently so that when kids come to school, they could feel safer. They could feel really good about themselves. They could focus on their schoolwork. And I think, you know, we've made a lot of strides, but I want to make sure that we continue to head in that direction.
I think a lot of the collaborations that are happening too is one way of kind of elevating the student voice, right? So the more voice they have in that, the more they're talking about their experiences, the more they're talking to each other, and the more they're talking to their adults, right? The more that climate tends to, I think, improve, right? Culture improves, it feels like a safe and comfortable environment, and that's what we strive for.
I'm not saying it's easy. I think it's difficult. There's difficult work here, and to ascertain how kids feel at this age and what's real and what is, you know,
Well, there's
just
a
feelings.
distinction between the weather and the climate, right?
Right.
Like that's, so,
And that's the distinction we want to continually be crystal clear about. So I'm really good. I love that analogy.
you can borrow that.
Thanks.
We will.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Josh, I didn't see you down
So
there.
speaking of weather and climate, are we thinking that school climate survey is saying this is gonna have a significant budget impact, or is this something that we can do in-house? I love the idea of having weather reports and a climate
I do
analysis.
think
Weather report leads to a climate analysis as opposed to a school climate survey, which I think is somewhat problematic. The ones that we've done in the past, frankly, I've never been really happy with the quality of the data collection, or with the effectiveness of the instrument that was used. And I think we'd probably be better off if we did some very inexpensive weekly or bi-weekly weather reports, where we ask just maybe one or two questions.
I
But we
love
could
the
do that
idea.
on a simple Google form.
Yeah, no, and look, that's how we extract as much information as we can from
Right.
the kids,
You
obviously.
can get longitudinal data that way across the year. How are things moving in a more quick way?
And you can tie that into your mood meeting.
Yes.
Right, because that's
Sure.
what you do every morning.
Based on some, recent conversations, we're meeting as an administrative team, I believe next week at some point, all building leaders, and we're going to develop an in-house snapshot climate survey, like how are you feeling? Have you felt X over the course of? And we're gonna do that periodically and then analyze the data by building, school, grade, and then, have a better, picture painted for us as to, what's going on and how kids are feeling.
I look forward to that data.
I don't have a question, more of a comment that, I learned something new today. The word of the day, concretize.
We Googled it. It's
Did you
not
Google it?
Oh, yeah.
Is it bogus or is it real?
Absolutely.
This guy.
Neil?
Yeah, just one general thing. I was very interested in what Kara said and what you talked about regarding report cards. And I know over the years ago, we talked about report cards and standard-based report cards and moving away from the traditional. I would be interested just, in the future, to see how, what is being reported in some of the things that you talked about regarding using them almost as a self-assessment, right? You said students, talk about first, assess yourself and how that all works to help increase student voice and make students more responsible for their learning. And I think that would just be good
So
for us.
one of the things,
to
Neil,
understand.
that we're very, proud of this year thus far is with the addition of the behaviors that promote learning and wellness and getting away from more compliance-based indicators. One of the other things we did is we created rubrics and other tools that kids can use and teachers can use together. So I think that's a really nice thing because again, it's self-assessment. It also underscores the importance of these future focused skills that, you know, people like Bill Daggett think are more important than many of the other standards. I will also remind the board that we also added a universal standard to every class on the report card, which is demonstration of critical thinking skills to solve problems and attain goals. So I think we're making good progress in that area. You know, the trick is to make the report cards representative of the daily practice, the routines. And again, talking about destiny, if you want to know your destiny, know your daily routines, right? That's one of the greatest predictors of one's destiny. I still don't yet know how I wound up here, but okay. Thank you for your question, Mr. Haber.
You're welcome. Bye.
Any other questions for Michael and Nicole? All right,
Great,
well, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Team PVC. Now the high school, Laura, Mark, and Erica.
Okay, thank you. So when we go last, sometimes we tend to echo some of the themes that we've heard, which is a good thing because it shows that we're all unified here. So on our first slide, we also want to think about the 3 years in the 3 budgets as being one long-term vision. And our analogy is thinking of each year as a chapter in a book, right? It's not a collection of short stories. It's not an anthology, but each chapter is going to build on the previous chapter to tell one unified story. And the title of this book is not how school could be different each year, but rather what school can be. So that means every year we're going to take big steps because we have a big journey that we're going on here. And it's not about incremental steps, but rather big changes that we can make each year so that we can plan and how we're going to build towards a collective vision, which is our vision map.
We'll go to the next slide, and before we zoom in on the specifics of this chapter of our book, here's the overview of our proposed budget. And I sometimes receive some judgment from some of my colleagues about my high approach to budgeting. So we're going to strategically start with some of the reductions on this slide. So you'll see a few changes, such as a reduction in the curriculum development, and that accounts for some more local conferences that our faculty is planning to attend in the upcoming year. You'll see a healthy reduction in supervision that accounts for the retirement of one of our amazing support staff members, and also me returning this fall. You'll see a decrease in occupational education that is really just a result of the way BOCES does their charges us over a 3-year period, but we actually do have 29 students right now in the BOCES Tech Center programs, which is a really healthy, exciting number. And we actually anticipate we'll have the same, if not more, students next year. So that reduction in cost doesn't actually mean that we have fewer students going. And then now I have to point out a few of the increases. So we have an increase in guidance services that accounts for the 0.2 of that K-12 bilingual social worker position that Rachel spoke about earlier. There's also an increase in the teaching category that aligns to a 0.6 increase in our social studies department that takes our current 0.4 part-time position to a full-time position. Which I'll talk about more in the presentation as to why. And then we also have that additional 0.2 in special education that is coming from PDC as our current 9th graders continue to need that support, and we have 8th graders coming in. Go to the next slide then. And there again is a visual representation of what was just shared. Obviously teaching being the most important part of that.
So on these next couple of slides, you'll see the vision map, because as we were planning our budget, we're looking at how it's going to impact student learning and how we're going to continue the growth of the plan that we all have. So you've heard us promoting or probably bragging about all of the interdisciplinary passion-based classes that we're going to be offering next year. And those are listed under the 24-25 list on the slide up there. But that excitement is still growing and spreading because teachers are still, they're talking about it, they're collaborating, and they're breaking down the existing barriers that exist between subject areas in traditional education. And so they're imagining these new courses and new experiences and how they can make connections for students. We often get emails that start with, so I was talking to so-and-so, and what do you think about a course that would tie together these two ideas? So it's just in the faculty room, in the hallways, at department meetings or in faculty meetings, people are talking about interdisciplinary courses. So they're spreading. And you'll see under the 25-26, because as we're talking about this growth model and how each year we're going to be expanding, these are some possibilities, ideas that have been thrown out to us to say, what do you think about? So while these are not set in stone, we're thinking about them now because they take time to plan. And next year, they're going to be planning these courses because they need to be in the course catalog for January so that way students can sign up for them the following year. We're also talking about expanding our Connections course, which is the English and Global Studies course that's being offered next year. That's going to include all ninth graders, hopefully, in the 25-26 school year. In addition, we have dual enrollment courses that are also beginning to flourish through UAlbany and WCC. They're growing in popularity as students and families are seeing that they can earn college credit for courses that are taken here at the high school. So in addition to physics and US history and statistics, we're also going to be adding pre-calculus and biology next year as credit-bearing courses. And as teachers are learning about what dual enrollment is, the process of going about being approved through these different universities, that people are saying, well, I could do that too. What about if I made this course into a dual enrollment course as well? So the budget supports interdisciplinary and dual enrollment courses because we also have things like summer work to develop these courses, books and materials, different models of co-teaching. Right now, we're talking about double class size with 2 teachers, so it doesn't affect FTEs, but as we're looking at additional models and having 2 teachers in the room with a smaller class, for example, eventually that might affect the number of teachers that we would need to sustain these types of programs.
If I can just add, in high school, kids vote with their feet, and we're seeing it in the dual enrollment courses. So there's no question that that value proposition has been heard and received pretty favorably.
The next slide would be the idea of academic concentrations. This was sparked from Learning 2025 that many of us attended. So very briefly, academic concentrations are something that are earned across the grades 9 through 12. And it's a comprehensive curriculum that challenges students to pursue their passions, to think critically, to collaborate effectively, and to innovate across disciplines in that broader area. Right now, we're thinking about humanities, STEM, and civics to start. And it's going to tie together coursework, extracurricular activities, community service, and they will all culminate in some sort of project senior year that would demonstrate student learning and tie together the disciplines in that particular concentration. So even just yesterday, during our faculty meeting, departments were collaborating and sharing their thinking about concentrations, what could be added, their the courses that they currently offer, courses they could offer in the future that would fit into these concentrations. And it's definitely generating excitement. It's sparking more ideas for interdisciplinary courses that would fit under these larger umbrellas. They're seeing how their courses connect to other disciplines in the building. They're even thinking about outside experiences, thinking about field trips, summer experiences, guest speakers, assemblies. How can we get students to really embrace those passions that they have and to see how they apply in different areas of life, not just in the four walls of one particular classroom?
Okay, so talking a little bit about the schedules, let me tell you why schedule is really pretty cool. It's pretty much a cool thing. Really, because what a schedule needs to do is to embody what a school wants to be. And so we've started on this process, and we, as you I think know, we've been working to identify a consultant to work with us and revise our master schedule and look at how we can include different things that support all the different initiatives that are part of this sort of several multi-year project. So we're talking about how to support blocks of time that better support interdisciplinary classes, that support teachers collaborating together and having that planning time together during the day. Looking at how we can include during the day time for kids to follow interests and passions, possibly through something like allowing extracurricular experiences within the school day. So these are things we hope that we can incorporate as part of a new redesign of a schedule. So exciting times, and I think bottom line, times that are going to support what we want to do.
So this slide here is just a concept of a schedule that we would like to adopt something of this nature. Of course, we're talking about having a consultant to come in to help with this process, but a few highlights of what could happen here at CHHS is a schedule such as this that has an earlier time, a block of time that has built-in time for PD for teachers. Students can use that time for seminars, special assemblies, events, flexible blocks of scheduling that can accommodate our interdisciplinary courses, as well as more traditional courses. So students can have a mix of larger blocks that might be their humanities course, and then have a single period art class. So it has to be able to accommodate different lengths of time because students are taking different courses that require them to be in classrooms and together and collaborating for longer periods of time. It also moves our helping period from the end of the day to earlier in the day. And instead of just being for helping period, it's a flex time where perhaps some clubs can meet. We're talking about equity as well. As students who have to care for younger siblings or have to work after school, we don't have transportation after school for them as well. That might be an issue where some kids aren't able to participate in the wonderful extracurricular activities that we have here. So by moving it as part of the school day, it helps with equity and access. And also, additional supports meeting time with teachers during the school day and not just waiting until the end. Perhaps when, kids are like, oh, well, I'm just going to go home now because it's the end of the day. So there's many benefits to a schedule such as this, and we hope to, meet all of our requirements, particularly with working with a consultant.
So all of what you've heard about so far, whether it's the schedule, the interdisciplinary courses, or concentrations, do not happen without strong foundational supports, kind of lifting us up that can be maintained from year to year. So I think all of us in schools know that the easiest way for a wonderful idea to fail or to drop off after a year is to ask people to do it and invest in it without giving them the time, the support, the budget, and the space to do it. So I want to share how we are approaching this kind of sustained support that we think will accomplish this over time. And the amazing part of this being a chapter in the book is that we're really thinking through carefully what supports look like over time so that we can focus on what our faculty needs to bring this to life. So starting with the teaching positions that I mentioned briefly. So I think most of you know, we have recently added some FTE over the last couple of years in English and then math and science to allow for our pedagogical coaching position. So that's already happened. We also recently increased a part-time art position to full-time, and we now have our band teacher, Ms. Zante, almost full-time now at the high school. And so we've been planning our interdisciplinary courses for this upcoming school year, as Erica briefly mentioned, sort of as pilots based on our existing staffing. So we've been able to create these 4 courses for next year based on who we already have. And we did that intentionally as a pilot. We wanted to spend the time before we asked for more people to make this work. So now we're at the point of asking for more people. It was coming. But so, like I said, now that we've been through this sort of cycle of planning and pre-implementation, we have started to create a plan for the kind of infrastructure that we think we need to scale up to where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. So in this year's budget, we have a 0.6 increase in social studies, which brings us from a 0.4 part-time position to a full-time position in social studies. And this gives the department a staffing addition that allows us to create the next phase of interdisciplinary courses, which would be most likely offering connections to all of the incoming ninth graders. So they all have that common interdisciplinary experience. And also the possibility of a new conservation civics course, which is a combination of social studies and science. It also creates a really, I think, unique opportunity in this 1 year overlap period where we don't have the, say, conservation civics course yet, to allow us to be creative and have 2 social studies co-teaching 1 course in sort of a mentorship role. So we'll have a new social studies teacher co-teaching a new course with an existing social studies teacher. So it's a little bit of one of many models of the elbow to elbow collaboration, but I think in a traditional mindset, what you would see if you have an extra period for a teacher, you would say, where can I make a slightly smaller class size? And we're saying, we already have smaller class sizes. How about we take that 1 period and make it golden and have 2 people that can spend an entire year co-teaching together and learning from one another and training a person to take over that course. So we have a few, I'd say, holes in our schedule that we're thinking about a lot differently than we used to because of this work. So that's it for this year that we're asking. At this time next year, we plan to also be asking for an additional English position to create the same cycle of adding teaching infrastructure for this next phase. And so that will have basically added slight increases to FTE in almost all of our departments over the last 2 years and looking ahead to the next 2 years. And then we might promise we'll start. The last piece of increase that we're currently exploring, again, not for this upcoming school year, but for the following school year, is the possibility of adding a 4th school counselor at the high school for the 25-26 school year. So that should hopefully give you a sense of what we're looking at in terms of teaching staffing. And
So next slide is about instructional space. So so you've seen most of what's up here. These are spaces that have, or almost all spaces that have currently been created. If you look upper left, for example, you're looking at the remodeled library. I think one room that's not pictured up there is the room that you're in, right? So the new furniture that you see around us in the building, which is really going to very good use. One space, see, third on the right on the bottom, or third from the left on the bottom, is a thought about a new space for esports. So we're thinking about that type of a design to support something new and creative. But we have 2 new spaces. The general idea is to remodel 2 spaces a year. So 2 spaces are in the current budget.
And I think Jared, in his recent budget presentation, talked a lot about esports. And so we're charging his budget for the esports, but we're about the good stuff about it. But just for the people who are not familiar with esports, and personally, I was not until we started exploring this journey and found out how incredible they can be. And we've been looking into some research about how participating in esports can actually be just as beneficial from a social emotional perspective for kids as participating in traditional athletics. So we think that has some real potential. But so in terms of district and school culture, Our budget also continues to support our phenomenal pedagogical coaching program that we're so proud of. So as you see as I think you've heard about before, coaching model is sort of at the center of how we are scaling up our work and investing in our faculty to create some of the experiences you've heard about so far. Our coaches have become integral to developing new interdisciplinary courses. They've really become the architects of redesigning some of the active learning spaces that Mark has talked about. And they are still continuing to support teachers individually. They're using their classrooms as laboratories. They're facilitating professional development, and they are integral members of the hiring process as well, which I know you've all heard about as well. It's just so hard to imagine what our school would be without them at this point, and it's only been 2 years to get from where we started to all that they're doing now. And we also continue to have the passion project support in our budget, which is again another example of when people have these amazing ideas to be able to say, here's a way that you can do them. Here's a pathway to do it. Here's the space, here's the time, and here's the money. So I think in closing, thank you for allowing us to share our multi-year journey towards the Vision F, and we hope that you'll look forward to hearing a lot of the same at a larger scale next year, impacting more and more students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? I just love the idea of the flex period somewhere in the middle of the day, because I feel like so many times it's just they're so done at the end of the day, they want to go home. But I love it. You also looked at it through the equity lens, because that does impact so many students. Last year, this time, we were talking about the schedule at the high school, and we were talking about the possibility of making the day longer. Is that not, it's just not a, I mean, I know it was a far reach, but I just think.
Starting later.
No, it wasn't starting later. It was just even like offering courses outside of the regular. But I guess there's not a need for that anymore, the way the work is developing.
I think we're trying to kind of take the time we have and reshift it so it's better used, right? So we have this like 35-minute chunk of time at the end of the day that is well used by some, but by putting it back into the school day and also by going to like a single lunch period, which gives us more time, we're able to kind of reduce things that we think are not as effective in the schedule, like study hall, for example. Not the best use of a high school student's time, or, you know, I'd ballpark 90% of them, right? So by sort of reallocating our time, we think a first step toward that is actually maximizing the school day, if that makes sense. I don't think it's necessarily off the table, but it's a starting point for us.
Yeah. You said something about different courses and different times for a course. Are you envisioning more long-term to go more like a college type scheduling, where if you want to take an interdisciplinary course, that might meet for an hour and a half?
Right, yeah.
And then a student would in essence build a schedule, not just on, okay, what period, you know, what course do I want to take, but also kind of thinking about how do I fit all those together in a day or a week? And teachers would also be accepting teaching in that way, and obviously that's some contractual implications that could have to work through. But
absolutely. And that's what's really, going through the finding a consultant process has been very interesting, because we already have a very good schedule. Other schools come and visit our school to see our schedule, people that are going from a traditional one to a non-traditional one. So we've talked to a number of consultants who have, here's model A, here's model B, here's model C, which one do you want? And we don't want any of those. So we think we found a person who is going to start from scratch with us. And one of the things that this person shared was exactly what you said, is that instead of approaching a schedule as students put in all the inputs of the things you want and need, you have to think about it a little bit more like, here are the periods when this interdisciplinary course is offered. Here are the periods when these electives are offered. You build your puzzle based on what you're trying to accomplish. So it's a really different way of thinking about scheduling that I don't think any of us have ever done. And so even if you, Greg, if you could go back to the schedule slide that Erica was talking about with the example, one of the steps to get there is if you look at, say, the end of the day block on a Monday, you'll see A, B, and C. So if you're a student who's taking 3 shorter traditional courses, you might have a block 3A, 3B, and 3C. But if you're a student who is taking an hour-and-a-half interdisciplinary course, you just have a 3ABC, that's one course. That makes sense. So we really need a schedule that can do both of those things and also be a student who can be a 3AB block student and a 1A, 1B block, single period student, if that makes any sense. Makes sense in my head.
Still juggle course offerings to make sure everybody meets their requirements, which is gotta be challenging.
Yeah.
But it's also a question of staffing, because once we talk about that, we talk about contractual limitations, that's gotta fit within, you know,
Yes.
Yeah,
staffing,
examining
you know,
contract
contractual
language, too.
language and, you know, will we need more staff? You know, more 0.8s and 0.6s that fit, and if things change year by year, you know, so what do? We'll have to
No,
think about all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think one of the things that we want to continue to avoid, and I think we've done a really good job of moving away from, is plugging holes with a 0.2 and a 0.4. Because that is not sustainable. It's not the best model for finding the best people who are part of our vision map and investing in them. So I think that's the idea of approaching it like plugging holes is a no-go for us. But we've obviously started building this out to see what it can look like, and we know it can work. And we've spent some time with our CTA union president looking at our existing contractual language, making sure the language around minutes is flexible enough that it will still work even when we get to this point. She's seen this and gone through this all with us, so it's not a far-fetched situation where we're gonna have to completely upend the way our teachers contract read.
And because something about this particular example is if it's based on a 9th grade student, all of those requirements are on that schedule. I know that the print is small, but the idea of taking your English and social studies as a block, making sure you have your world language. If you're in band, there's a spot for that. So we took a typical student, and, you know, they might be in different levels of courses, but a typical student and how many electives they would take, their 4 classes, and put them into this schedule to see whether or not it would work in meeting state standards, or as far as the hours that are required for seat time, as well as contractual minutes. So a lot of thought went into trying to address the questions that you brought up in those considerations when we're looking at creating the schedule. And then by bringing in an expert to supplement our ideas and to help us bring them, you know, more to a perfect product, I think will be useful.
Question on, how do you envision measuring the outcomes of these initiatives?
So, I mean, I could start with like the kind of, for interdisciplinary classes, for example, as they get started. Feedback from students is what would be our best measurement, right? Getting focus group, and survey data from our students. A lot of our teachers actually already do anonymous surveying of their classes to get feedback. As Mark mentioned, our students vote, with their interest, right? So we saw it already with, like signups for bioethics, for example. They exceeded what we expected, them to be. And, you know, so that data tells us that students want this. we'll be able to, you know, we'll be able to know that our belief is correct, that students can do these types of classes and still do just fine on the Regents exams and all those requirements. So we'll have that data as well. I'm pretty confident that that's going to be the case. But we'll have that, you know, for interdisciplinary classes. For concentrations, I think that one is probably a little bit harder to measure with hard data, but I think we're going to get that from the student experience. How often do kids have a 3 or 4 year cohesive experience in high school? High school students are very used to taking 8 disparate things, having different experiences throughout the day. So to get feedback on how it impacts students when they have a plan to follow, I think will be really interesting for us. But it's going to be a lot of anecdotal data, I think, at the beginning. I don't know if you guys have other thoughts to add.
Yeah, and some of them, we might not be getting immediate feedback. For example, with concentrations, it's going to take kids 3 or 4 years, depending upon when they're starting to get to that culminating project, to see what that looks like and what their overall experience is. So I think as we're really thinking critically about it and designing what those concentrations will be with the input of all of the faculty, we can be confident that we're presenting something that we feel will be the best learning experience for our students who are interested in those areas. And then we'll have to wait some time to see if their experience in our data and observations support what we hope will happen.
I think we can also look at enrollment too, because one of the things for both concentrations and interdisciplinary courses are, we didn't want and never intended these to be honors classes or only for a certain type of student. So that's something, that's actually more hard data that we can track. Who's signing up for these courses? Do we have a representative makeup of our student body who want to do concentrations and who are enrolled in these courses? So that's an important data point.
I think we're gonna hear from our students pretty quickly, how they feel. They tend to tell us pretty quickly, so.
That's a testament to the fact that you're hearing them, right? Because they wouldn't be speaking to you if you weren't listening.
When you think about the concentrations, have we thought about, and this is obviously a longer term process, but how that gets reported then on transcripts and talking to how we explain that story to
We're definitely talking about that. And I think that's part of what we have to work out as part of the process, but you know, the idea is that it would be reflected just like we currently, if we give an advanced diploma through this, or advanced Regents diploma, like a state designation, it could look much like that. But I think the real story is got to be told as part of the school profile and what we send to the colleges to explain what we're doing.
I also think that our students are going to have some really interesting artifacts to share with their future colleges from going through this concentration process, because we're envisioning students completing the project well before they leave for CHUFSD in their senior year. So this doesn't have to be, the last day of senior year that you submit your project, because you're building a portfolio over time. So we actually think that our kids are going to have something kind of unique that they might be able to use throughout their post-secondary application process that a lot of other students won't have.
I remember a student in particular, we were meeting about the potential of having a community service fair, which we now have. And the student was talking about how he was interested in medicine. And he went to one of the local hospitals to volunteer. And he was talking about his college essay and how he was able to tie together his community service with his passion, with his coursework, where he wanted to go, his extracurricular activities. And you could hear the excitement in his voice as he talked about how all of these things connected. And we're creating that structure for students who may not be aware of how they can make that connection at this stage of the game. And by putting that structure in place, it allows more students to have that experience.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your presentation. And again, just thank all of you for coming here tonight and really laying out think, very compelling stories and narratives for where we're going, not just next year, but in future years, in a way that, you know, isn't just about the numbers, as much as we like getting the numbers from Denise.
And I would just add, what I said after the presentation is equally applicable to the other schools and to people post personnel services. We really think, you know, we talk about multi-year budgeting, and that's one of the things that we are encouraged to do as a school district for. But here we're not talking multi-year budgeting so much as the numbers, the dollar side. But we're talking about it on the vision side, and we are, you know, thinking, and as a collective group, we'll continue to think about how, you know, the dollars fit where we want to go. I think that's an important message for our community and for anybody else who comes to look at the way you've, you know, central office and the buildings have all embraced a different vision of how we think about things.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, so we do have some other parts of our meeting to continue with, but I would like to let you go home, and you have long days tomorrow.
Nice to see you.
Yes. Travel safely.
That's it. Yes. It's,
Go fund me.
Yeah, perfect. Wow. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. Let's go. We're gonna have some fun. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Didn't you say you
Right.
can't do anything if
Twice.
it's fun?
Nicole's got it twice. Right?
There was a tally going.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
It might have been 3.
I didn't do it a single time.
You lied.
We would beg to differ. Is everybody wear the tally?
Have a tally on you, so.
Well done. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. All right. We will now move into hearing of the public. We ask that any community member who would like to address the board related to school district matters, you can use the podium there. You can sign in on the sign-in sheet that is there, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
When, high school was implementing the bioethics course. This year I have to. It's not, plausible. The bioethical problems in the United States are so profound. I can't imagine bringing in the morality, the philosophers, the priests, the rabbis to address those problems here, whether it be experimentation on unborn children, experimentation on inoculation, the history of experimentation on prisoners and blacks. Ain't gonna happen, because the first thing that should be brought is their COVID experience, the lies, the misapplications of medicine, the treatment, the lockdowns. It will never happen because of what this district and other districts did, violated what should have done. So the fact that you teach bioethics, well, it's hilarious. You can't do it. You don't have the resources. But I figured you were going to talk about, which you alluded to in the last meeting, was changing your DEI policy. And there are certain forces outside the school and certain forces on the school board, which I believe have reached critical mass. And representing myself and minority opinions in this school district, because this is a liberal, progressive, socialist sort of school district. Minority opinion is not well represented in this board, and it's not well represented in the classrooms, and it's not well represented with majority of students. So when you see certain school board members saying we're gonna push this philosophy all the way down to every level, whether it be pronouns, bathrooms, sports, etc. It's frightening. So it's frightening to see, and we've seen it in other districts, where mathematics is going to be examined for DEI and equity problems. What inevitably has happened is standards have been lowered. I can see standards being lowered right here. Most report cards are automated. The phraseology, the information a parent needs is not on a report card generally handwritten by the teacher. It's a bunch of words plucked out of a computer somewhere and thrown in the report card. So the idea that the school board, the policy, the administrators would be in charge of censoring curriculum, censoring the selection of courses through an equity lens is terrifying.
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
It's absolutely terrifying. And we'll be involved the entire way. Thank you.
No other members of the committee. We will now move into new business. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the propositions resolution as presented.
So, second,
I'm sorry, Omar,
Omar.
on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the 2024-2025 notice of annual meeting and budget hearing as presented.
So
Second.
On the question?
I presume all of these have been reviewed by council.
Actually found out that the annual notice does not need to be approved by the board, but we have always done it that way, so we continue the practice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. We will now move into donations. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $500 from Bill Tom as a contribution to the Lacey Carr Scholarship at Croton Harmon High School. $250 to be awarded in 2024 and $250 to be awarded in 2025.
So moved.
second,
On the question?
I'd like to just speak. Lacey Carr was a beautiful little girl in Gwen's grade, so she would have been in 10th grade right now. And she definitely left this world too early. And I think this is a wonderful tribute to her, and I think both the Carr and the Dimes families, would appreciate that. I'm sure I don't need to speak on their behalf, but I just wanted to give a little bit of information regarding Lacey.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I appreciate it. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Right, recommended action that the Board of Education approves all items under the consent agenda.
so move,
Second.
On the question?
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. All right, we will now move into the closing of the meeting. We will be entering into executive session and expect to adjourn immediately following. So thank you for those of you who joined us this evening. Recommended action that the Board of Education enters into executive session to discuss the employment of a particular person or persons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries.
So,